Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here with us today. Happy Monday. My name is Katie Earle. I'm the coordinator of the University Express program, and I work for the Erie County Department of Senior Services. And we're joined here with Shane Stephenson today. He's going to give us a wonderful talk about the Larkin Company and all the things they've done for the community back in the day. And we're just happy to have him. So before we get to his presentation, I'm just going to go over my usual housekeeping things, because as always, we have a couple new folks here with us. So first thing, you just heard me say that we're recording the session, and I will try to post it on our website in the near future. Second thing that the new people have already noticed is that you've joined without your video showing and you're muted. Those are just the settings for our program. You have not done anything wrong. And also, as you've heard me say, there are a bunch of other people in here with us today. It's just that we're in an anonymous participation mode, so only Shane and I can see the complete list of everybody who's here. So throughout Shane's presentation, if you have any questions or comments, please go ahead and type those in the Q&A as soon as you think of them, so you don't forget. As you just heard, we'll take a couple pauses throughout his presentation to see what's come through. So if you're new to us today, you'll get your Q&A panel that would be on the right-hand side of your screen. It may already be up there if you're on a laptop or a computer. You just have to expand it. You'll see the text box, and you can send your questions right to Shane or myself. Or if you look at the lower right-hand side of your WebEx window, you might see a box with a question mark in it and Q&A. You can click on that. And last but not least, if you're on a tablet or smartphone, poke or touch your screen. That will bring up your control panel. You'll see a circle with 3 dots, and then you'll see Q&A. So there you'll find it. We hope you have some fun here. So we want to thank the sponsors of our program, which is my Department of Senior Services, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Western New York, Excelsior Orthopedics, and Wegmans for everything they do for this program. And as always, please do not hesitate to contact us at Senior Services. We're at 858-8526. All right, let's introduce Shane. Shane is the Director of Museum Collections at the Buffalo Naval Park. He previously worked in the research library at the Buffalo History Museum, has volunteered working on the archival collections at Forest Lawn Cemetery and St. Bonaventure University. He is the board vice president of the Buffalo Presidential Center and owns his own archiving business, Archives in the Buff. In addition to the Larkin Company, Shane's first historic picture book is titled Buffalo's East Side Industry, and he looks forward to presenting to you today. Shane, thank you for being here. It's all yours.
Hi, Katie. Thanks so much. And everyone, welcome today, and thanks for waking up a little bit early for us today. This is, I'm going to be going through a little of the Larkin Company and their social welfare programs that they established throughout the company's history. All right, so I do have a general Larkin Company presentation, but this is kind of an offshoot of it. But you'll learn a little bit about the company itself. And as Katie was mentioning, this is a historic picture book that I did called The Larkin Company. You know, pretty unique title there. But and also with my first book, Buffalo's East Side Industry. So I've worked with Katie for a very long time in the University Express program and have participated in many semesters with the University Express program. And I'm happy to be here today. This is a little different venue for us, as we know. So if it's a little disconcerting to you, it's a little disconcerting to me too, just because I'm used to being in front of people and having that little interaction back and forth. But I think we'll do okay today. So thanks, Katie. All right, so social welfare in the Larkin Company. And I do have, there you see the title screen, so let's move on. Okay, so let's see, let me just do a little, okay. All right, so yeah, so this stems from, as Katie had mentioned, I did work for 5 years in the research library at the Buffalo History Museum under Cynthia Van Ness. If anyone out there knows her, she's a wonderful boss. All right, so so I had access to a lot of the Larkin records and a lot of the Larkin publications that they had, and also access, most importantly, seeing as how this was a historic picture book, to photographs of the Larkin Company photograph collection. All right, and for about 4 years, at the time I had a full-time job because I worked at the History Museum part-time, and I actually worked in the Larkin building So, just being around all that history, and, the Zemskys have done a wonderful job in what's known as the RST building, or the Larkin Exchange now, of capturing some of that history. All right, so I'm going to be going over, we're going to be doing an overview of the company, and as Katie had also mentioned, we can pause if there's questions coming in, and I can answer those, so we don't have to wait until the end of the presentation. All right. All right, so a little bit of the Larkin Company overview. All right, you'll see here we have a nice picture on the top of Elbert Hubbard, the sage of East Aurora, right, as he's kind of known. And down at the bottom, around 1880, is John Larkin himself. All right, so it was the company opened in about 1875. And as mentioned, he was about 30 years, John Larkin was about 30 years old when he opened the company. So prior to 1975, he worked for 10 years at his brother-in-law's soap company, a guy by the name of Justice Weller. And so Justice Weller had married John's older sister. So he kind of tagged along with his older sister, and he started working for that company. So they started out in Buffalo, and eventually they moved to Chicago, and where he witnessed the Great Fire, and where he met his wife, Frances Hubbard, who then brought along Elbert Hubbard. All right, so everyone seems to be tagging along with their older sisters here. So he had about, again, 10 years of soap experience and selling experience before he came back to Buffalo. Justice Weller and Company had dissolved, and John got a really nice sum of about $10,000. And he brought that back with his wife and Albert in tow to Buffalo, and then he opened up the John Larkin Soap Company. Right, so a couple of the early employees that everyone seems to know, or many people seem to know about, Elbert Hubbard is shown there, and Doward Martin. So they were two very early employees of the Larkin Company. And throughout my research, what I found was that John Larkin was able to capture really good employees in the beginning when he started his company, really innovative employees that really grew in their roles and helped the company succeed. So for people that know about the Larkin Company, there's the Larkin idea, all right? And that kind of spurned the company to their height as being the second or third largest soap manufactory in America. Their first rendition was called a combination box. All right, so this was Elbert Hubbard's idea, and in 1885, it was the first rendition of the Larkin idea, and it sold originally for $6, and then they made a larger combination box for $10. And now what that included was about 142 products, 100 of those, which were the Sweet Home soap, which was their first soap, and that was a laundry soap. Okay, so for $6, you'd get this big box in the mail filled with about 142 products, and that combination box really propelled the company. All right, so they were growing at the time, but the combination box was really the first reiteration of kind of showing an explosion of sales in the Larkin Company. All right, so later on, around 1900, they took a new idea and created Larkin secretaries, all right? And they created clubs, all right? So this is really what separates the Larkin Company from other soap manufacturers and many other just manufacturers around that time. So they recruited women in farms, small towns, medium-sized cities, and of course large cities, to start their own clubs. So these clubs would meet once a month. They would go through the Larkin catalog, or the Larkin catalog was once called the Products and Premium List, and they would pick for $10, they would pick products that then each of the secretary or each of the members of the club can use in their homes. All right, so the catch was at $10, you would then be able to get a premium, which was another household product, for free. So they set up clubs. There were clubs of 10 was the most popular, but they had 8 and 16 size clubs with women in their neighborhoods. So if they purchased $10 worth of product, those $10 worth of product would come to their homes. They would divvy them up the way they had them on their order sheet. And then in a rotating schedule, one of the club members would get that month's premium. All right, so it was a way of keeping sales going, right? Because with the combination box in 1885, you can imagine if you buy one box and you get 142 products, you don't really need to go back to the Larkin Company for about a year to buy more product, right? So they had stable sales, but people didn't have a need to buy more, right? Because 100 bars of laundry soap would take you, would last a long time. So that rendition, the Larkin clubs, were a way of keeping women engaged in the company every month. So at the height of the company, they had about 90,000 secretaries, which means about 90,000 clubs around the country, and about 2 million engaged club members. All right, so that was the engine that propelled the company all the way up to about 1920 when it started their decline. And I can cover that a little bit later. Sorry, I got to figure out how to move the mouse here. Okay. All right, so here's, if you can believe it, this is a picture of the Larkin employees in about 1883. So before they start the combination box, this photograph is where the Larkin Company established themselves, and the buildings are the remnants today. Seneca Street, Larkin Street, Van Rensselaer, right? But it's amazing in this photograph that everyone looks so young. They're mostly girls or women, and they all look so young. So I included this image in the book because it's just a fascinating look at employees, work, who Larkin was hiring, things like that. So there's a couple famous people, locally famous people in this image. Darwin Martin, if you can see there, he's second from right. So you'll see there's a little boy leaning against the wall on the right-hand side of the picture. Darwin is immediately to the left of him with a little mustache and the white collar and then the overcoat. So he was very young when he started at the company. He was about 13. Darwin Martin's older brother, Frank, worked for the Larkin Company, and he decided to go west, young man. So he asked John Larkin to kind of watch his little brother and take him under his wing. So that's how Darwin Martin got involved in the Larkin Company at a very early age. And he was, I think from research, he was the first office manager behind John Larkin. You'll also see the Koss brothers, which were really integral in the growth of the Larkin Company as well. They're a little harder to point out, but behind Darwin Martin's right shoulder, you'll see a man with a really large mustache. That would be Daniel Koss. All right, and then if you go to the window where the fan is in, and you see a taller guy who's blonde. All right, so he's 2 behind his brother. That is William Koss. All right, and they were from Philadelphia. But they came to Buffalo and worked for the Larkin Company at a very early age, right when the company was pretty much seeded and started. And Daniel ended up the head of shipping and receiving, and William became the superintendent of buildings. All right, so they had about 33 years with the company, and they retired, I believe, in about 1911, I believe. So my math is not good, but so I can't figure out in my head when they started. But so this gives you a really nice view of the amount of employees they had in 1883 before they started the combination box, and again just the ages. Right. So sometime later, this photograph was found in the desk of an executive, and down below the picture, it listed the names of every employee, or at least as much as that individual could remember. And even at the time, there were 5. So between the photograph and when this individual started writing down everybody's names, 5 of these workers had died in that time period. So it just kind of shows you the medical care at that time as well. All right. All right, so kind of talked a little bit about the beginnings, but here's a photograph, or I'm sorry, a stylized ink sketch of their first factory on Chicago Street. So when he came back to Buffalo from Chicago, he opened up this 3,000 square foot factory there on Chicago Street. All right, and then later they moved, and that lower picture shows a very early rendition, probably I think the 1890s, of what turns into the Seneca Street complex. All right, so what we now know as 701 Seneca, this is the beginnings of that building. All right, so let's, when you see that building, a really large white building, know that it is a collection of 11 different buildings that they just refaced all the same, with all the same product and material. So it isn't one large building, it's a collection of 11 or 12 disparate buildings that over time they merged together into. All right, so this is probably looking at from maybe Seymour Street, which is 1 block north. And this is this photograph is looking at the corner of Seneca and Larkin Street, what is now Larkin Street, is just coming in right to the right of all of those buildings. So if we were to imagine today, on the other side of that street is Building I, or the powerhouse. And right now, I still think there's the large Army, Navy surplus store, all right, that's in that building. So that kind of gives you, so this would be the northwest corner of the Larkin complex, but we are looking at it from a southern angle. All right, so you can see there were homes on that block of Seneca Street, and eventually Larkin kept moving to the left off of the picture to Van Rensselaer Street. All right, so I hope that clears it up, and of course, if there's any questions, please feel free to ask. All right, so it's really as interesting as the growth of the company is, the company's downfall is just as interesting. All right, so really their zenith and their height was about 1920. Again, I've already listed that they had about 2 million customers. They were having aggregate sales of about, in today's money, about $340 million, aggregate yearly sales, 23 million in that day. They had about 2,600 workers in Buffalo and about 4,800 workers around the country. All right, so by 1922, though, we had those 90,000 secretaries that established clubs, right, around the country. They had lost about 20,000, so they were bleeding about 10,000 secretaries a year, right? And so that really precipitated the downfall and their inability to adapt to the changing time. About 1924, excuse me, to 1926, all of the major executives either pass away or retire, and they lose all of that institutional memory, as I have about 150 years of institutional memory. And eventually it's taken over by John Larkin's children, right? And their business acumen isn't as keen as their father's was, and they just kind of precipitate the fall and they do not have the help of executives like Heath or Martin or Esty, or any of those people that guided the company from its beginnings. So now they're losing profit. They're trying to diversify a little bit. They begin selling off their buildings. They cease all manufacturing. They do expand to include gas stations, grocery stores, and they have the flagship department store, which is in that building, now known as the 701 Seneca, in the corner at Seneca and Van Rensselaer. And now there's Eccles Restaurant right at that corner there. All right. So the company continues to bleed and lose money. The Larkin Administration Building, which I cover extensively in the book, is a byproduct of that. They have to sell that building, and eventually it gets torn down because the Larkin Company was not able to secure it in moving into the future. All right, so that's a real sign of their downfall. All right, so profits continue to tumble, and by 62, they are just mostly a warehouse concern. All right, being a storage company, right? They have plenty of space. That's the one thing they do have, is plenty of space. So over those 15 years, the employee numbers shrink. They have a lot of space. All right, so they become a warehouse, a storage facility. And then they finally close in 1967 when they sell their RST building, or what's now known as Larkin Exchange, to Graphic Controls. And then that takes the Larkin footprint away from Buffalo completely. Right. Interestingly enough, their last sale of product is in 1962. So they stopped producing things in 1941. All right, but they still have product on hand for another 21 years of sales. All right, so they make their last sales to a woman in Philadelphia in 1962. And again, that kind of shows you that they kept producing product without being able to sell it. All right, so they had 21 years of overstock, so to speak. Okay, so Larkin and his social welfare roots. All right, so in 1895, as you'll see there on the graph, they have about 150 employees. So even, I mean, how many were in that picture from 1883? Maybe 50 or so, 60. So they've continued to grow at a albeit a smaller, slower pace. But only 5 years later, you'll see they grow tenfold, practically tenfold, to 1,000 employees. Then between 1900 and 1907, they grow another 1,300 people. And so those are individuals that are working in the office and individuals working in the factory itself, the plant making the products and the premiums. All right, so this kind of really, this quick growth for the time period really created a disconnect between the employees. And one of the things that Larkin and other executives really wanted to promote was a sort of familial connection between all of the employees, whether they're executives, whether they're office workers, or whether they're on the factory floor. So all of a sudden, within these 12 years, they find that employees are breaking down into groups based on language, based on gender, and they want to try and put a stop to that and kind of bring everyone back together again under the Larkin mantra of strong work ethic, strong family, which is how he viewed his company. Right, and nowhere is that really well represented than in the Larkin Administration Building itself. All right, if you have a copy of my book, the titles of the chapters are named for phrases and sayings that were along the 5th floor, overlooking the courtyard area. like liberty, equality, and fraternity. So this building really represented what they wanted to show, all right, and what they wanted the employees to embrace, right? So strong work ethic, love of neighbor. There's some religious zeal inserted in there. So that's really why they grew the social welfare programs, was because people were splintering into gender, into languages, because the immigrant population was just influxed into the company. Katie, any questions so far or anything?
We actually have quite a few questions and comments, so I will start. One of the first comments that came through was about the combination box, and it was the first Tupperware party.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. That's very true. Yeah, so they kind of established the let's get together in our neighborhood and go through the catalog and order product, and then yeah, then they would each get a premium in a rotating schedule. So yeah, it was very an early Tupperware party.
Next thing, in relation to other soaps, was this considered a good value? In today's money, what was $6?
Oh, that is a good question that you know what? I apologize. I cannot answer what $6 would have been. I think for $6 and then for $10, yeah, you were getting again 142 different products. So the laundry soap was most of them, about 100 bars you'd get of the Sweet Home soap. But certainly by the combination box time in 1885, they also had toilet soap, or what we call bath soap. All right, they had perfumes and powders and things for your teeth, teeth cleaning, and just general hygiene product. So if you figure if you're buying a $6 or $10 box, that might last you 6 months or something. So, but I'm sorry, I don't know how to transcribe that $6 into money today. I'm sorry.
That's okay. At least you're honest. Next, the comment: the women would be young because women would work only until marriage. People usually went to 8th grade in school, so they began work young.
That's very true, and it was before child labor laws and things like that. So yeah, it is very interesting. What really was shocking was the fact that because what they did, I wish I don't know the name, but in that where they list everyone's name, they do like an outline of their bodies. So they put the number in where their faces would be, so you can match the picture with the outline. And so the five, there was one guy who died, but 4 of them were girls. I think 2 or 3 of them were in the front row of that picture too. So it's, but sure, they became housewives, and probably pretty early on that too, maybe 16 or 17. So yeah, thanks for saying that.
There's a lot here, so I'm just going to go through a couple more, Shane, if that's all right, and then we can keep moving and get to the rest. Question is, what were the job assignments for these young women?
Oh, well, they were more than likely making the product. All right, so John Larkin, he had Darwin Martin in the office. So the office staff was probably pretty small based on that picture. So I would say that most of the women were actually making the product, making the perfume or the colognes or the soap. Again, that's very early on, 1883, so it's only about 8 years after the company was founded in Buffalo. And I think they had about 9 different products at that time. So most of them would have been in the factory, and that would be the buildings that you saw behind them. At that time, the office was still connected to the factory, but in 1906 that changed, and they pulled all of the office workers, which would have been at that time about 1,100 people were working in the office, and they pulled all those people into the Larkin administration building across the street from the factory floor. So it's while Larkin was kind of ahead of his time with social welfare, there still was a division between office workers and factory workers.
Thanks, Shane. Next question along for the women. Did any women reach management positions that you know of?
No, I've never seen, no. Executive management positions, no, I've never seen that. My research, it's mostly the men and mostly guys that had, Frank Lloyd Wright homes built, I guess, except for Larkin himself. So you have Heath, you have Darwin Martin, you have Harold Esty, and they either lived in Larkland, which is what they called where, right now it's at Forest and near Windsor and Lincoln Parkway, all right, where the John Larkin Jr. home still is, and that's, was a Buffalo Seminary building, and maybe still is for a while, but it was a decorator's show house, right, for many, many years. So most of the executive level were men. Women, there is evidence that women moved up to, say, middle management, all right? So certainly, I'll talk a little bit about the health care that they did and the medical care that they did. They did have female doctors and female nurses in the medical department. The dental department was different, but in the medical department, they did have doctors. And so, yeah, I believe, there's a woman in charge of the YWCA that was higher up in the hierarchy. So women did grow in their positions, but not to that 4 or 5 or 6 executive level management.
Okay, thanks, Shane. One more comment. If you would like to see thousands of Larkin products and premiums, visit the Larkin Gallery in the Larkin Center of Commerce at 701 Seneca, Monday through Friday from 8 to 6 for a self-guided tour.
That is right. That was set up. Along the way, I've met some really nice people who have been involved in Larkin potentially a lot longer than I have been. And so 2 individuals that I really like, Jerry Puma and Sharon Osborne, they set up that Larkin Gallery, and it's a really lovely display of various Larkin products. And they were nice enough to let me use for the book some of the resources in that gallery. But it's true, it's a really fascinating look.
Thanks, Shane. And then we have a couple folks who looked up what $6 would have been back in 1920, 1890, and 1885. It's looking to be about $100 or so.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to jot that down because now I'll know for future. I appreciate that. Unfortunately, I could not look that up, but 6 equals about $100 today. Cool.
Yeah, and we have quite a few more things, but I'll let you continue, and then we can get to some of the rest.
Sure. That sounds good to me. Yes. All right. So thanks for all those questions, and look forward to a little bit more for our time left. Okay. So talked a little bit about the roots. A lot of immigrants coming in, different disparate languages. They would all kind of go their separate ways. That ran contrary to Larkin and the feeling that his workplace was familial, based around work ethic, charity, caring for your fellow citizen. So, right, 64% of the women, 64% of the workforce were women. As I mentioned, there was a little religious zeal attached to this, but in a very humanist sort of way, if I'll say that, it would be the right way of saying it. Again, caring concern for your fellow human, global policies to bring the world together, things like that. So in 1897, every building constructed after 1897 was for creating a safer work environment. And again, that's an extension going way back to the beginning of the presentation that John Larkin witnessed the Great Chicago Fire. And so he said, well, I don't want that. I would hate to see that happen to my factory and my employees. So after 1897, he started creating workplaces with high ceilings, fire controls at the time, the most up-to-date fire controls. A lot of fresh air was brought into each of the factory buildings. In 1900, he reduced the working day for factory workers to about 9 hours. All right, so that was about 40 minutes. He brought it down to 9 hours a day and reduced the office staff to about 8.5 hours a day. So again, this is really before a lot of the labor laws and protections that came around the 1910s, 1920s. And but he was recognizing that he would like to give back to his employees a little bit and kind of create a shorter workday for them. All right, so this is broken down into 4 categories. All right, this comes from Professor Stanger, who I worked with during my writing of the book. He had done a lot of academic journal articles about the Larkin Company, and he's broken these down into 4 different categories, right? Financial, education, health, and leisure. All right, so I'll just kind of run through a little bit of the financials. They did establish a benefit plan, all right, to provide financial stability in case of sickness or death to an employee. That was in 1906. 1908, you'll see that they established a home loan program, all right? So they kind of became a bank for their employees if they wanted to purchase a home. The thing with that was that you had to prove that you had at least $500 in your bank account, though. So that really precluded a lot of people from taking advantage of that program. They established a office benevolent fund for office workers specifically, right, in 1911. And then 3 years later, they did a benefit plan for the factory workers, right? So again, there's a little division between office work and factory work. 1923, they established some life insurance, the men's gratuity fund. And in a lot of my research, I would just get the name of the program, but I wasn't really able to locate what these programs actually did, right? So it would be like I'd get a list, kind of like what I'm showing here, but there wasn't much explanation as to what these programs were. So even in employee publications like ourselves, which was the employee publication, or the Larkin Idea, which was a publication that went to their customer base, there really wasn't much of an explanation. They did open a credit union, and then 1937 they offered hospital insurance. Right, by that time the company's really shrinking quite rapidly. All right, so the benefit plan is an example. So it started in 1906, and by 1915 they had, at least locally, that would have been about half the employees were taking advantage of this benefit plan. All right, and so for 20 cents a month, they would get $250 a week for health coverage and a $50 death benefit. For 40 cents a month, you'll see it's $5 a week and a $75 death benefit that would be paid to your family. And 60 cents a month, you'd get $7.50 coverage and a $100 death benefit upon your death. All right, so that kind of shows they did have different plans based probably on your salary. In the home loan program, as I mentioned, you'd had to prove that if you had at least $500 in your bank account at that time. Right? So they really wanted to Americanize, all right, many of the immigrants. All right, so that's probably the best way of saying it. So very early on, again, in their growth spurt from 1895 to 1907, they did establish a YWCA. All right, so they actually had a dormitory and a home where new immigrants that just arrived on their own could live for a while until they established themselves. And part and parcel with that dormitory were schools, right, and classes that they could take. They did establish a Buffalo Library branch within the Larkin Company itself, so that you can go and read a book during your breaks and things like that. Right? To take a book out, I believe if I'm right, to take a book out, you had to be an employee for 6 months. Right? So that was an interesting thing. And then by 1915, they're establishing schools, again, to Americanize a lot of the immigrants, so citizen classes. And I have an example of some of those, a lot of home economics. For that comment a little bit earlier, women get married, then they stop working and they're in the home. All right, so how to cook and clean and home economics courses, things like that. All right, so these were available to everyone, but the YWCA for the girls and the women was a really strong program for about 30 years, 35 years or so. Here's an example of, so all these images are from the book, but here's an example of one of the schools. Employees were encouraged to attend night schools. All right, as I mentioned, they were able to take a book out, and they were also able to write a book synopsis. All right, so to kind of practice English and grammar and writing, they would be able to take out a book and then write a book report. Certainly, so during World War I, the Americanization of immigrant workers, and I included just for fun a class schedule from 1910. So it shows literature, underwear, and gymnasium. On Tuesday, they taught cooking, embroidery, and swimming. Wednesday, china painting, shirtwaist making, millinery, study of India, interesting, basketball, and so it goes on and on through Thursday and Friday as well. So, some home economics, some education to help the newly immigrant workforce, ingratiate themselves to American culture. All right, so in 1905, moving on to health, they hired a trained nurse. All right, and in 1906, the Larkin Administration Building opened, and they did have spots, I believe it was the second level, for restrooms, lounges, showers, and locker rooms. Well, the locker rooms may have been in the basement, but the rest areas would have, I believe, on the second floor. 1910, they contracted with the Buffalo Homeopathic Hospital, and they had a room reserved for their employees, so they wouldn't get shut out, or if the beds were, if it was too full at the hospital. So they had a room reserved 24/7, 365 for their employees. 1913, they hired a practical nurse and a physician, and they opened a dental office in 1915. All right, so this is what I was mentioning a little bit earlier. So they did have a medical office for the office employees in the Larkin Administration Building, and then they also had one for the factory. All right, and so the heads, if I'm remembering the research right, the heads of those two medical offices were females. All right, so there were female doctors at the head of the office, the medical office for the office workers, and the medical office for the factory workers. Here's a picture of Dr. Hassong, who was the dentist. All right, so you can kind of see him through that, the health box there. All right, so they also assigned 2 employees a day to contact infirm or recovering employees in their homes. All right, and they also did home visits as well if they felt it necessary. All right, these home visits were used to investigate medical issues, missing persons, funeral arrangements, and general investigations of employees. All right, so it kind of was a little big brother-ish, wanting to check to make sure that the employee was still at home, and maybe today's standards, they would, they have investigations even today where they film people playing soccer when they say they have a broken leg or something like that, right? Not really like that, but you know what I mean. So investigating their employees. They did have restaurants, all right, so that was something they did offer. Pretty early on, they had a really nice cafeteria, and again, towards, by 1921, they combined the office and factory restaurants into it was building J and K, which are, if you're walking down Seneca in front of 701, it's right in between Larkin Street and Van Rensselaer would have been where their restaurant would have been, because those are the two buildings, J and K, right there. As an example, I show a little bit about from the employee newsletter Ourselves, that was called Ourselves. For 18 cents, you can get a plain, wholesome food at the lowest possible cost to employee. And for 30 cents, you could get daintier food with a larger variety. As an example, though, of while wanting to create a safe working environment, how the health of their employees was, if you see just from 1 year, right at the very bottom there, from 1 year from 1916 to 1917, there were 2,000 doctor's visits for minor injuries and 3,000 medical consultations, right? So that kind of is pretty much almost every single person goes at least once a year, or it's one person multiple times or something like that. But based on the number of employees around that time, I mean, everyone's going at least once potentially. All right. Again, this is before we take such things for granted in our health and our medical, the way medicine is today. Back then, I mean, you could die from a broken arm, something like that. So, yeah, it's just an interesting view into life back then. All right, now some leisure. So we've covered the financials, we've covered the education, we've covered the medical. Now we'll cover some leisure. 1899, they start offering free coffee. The coffee break is kind of coming around, and there are those that say Buffalo invented the coffee break for employees. So they offered free coffee. In 1902, they placed a piano in the office, and then they had it in the Larkin Administration Building in 1906 as well, for use during the lunch hour. They began hosting Christmas parties for their employees in 1904. They established, as I mentioned, the YWCA, the Larkin YWCA. In 1910 and beyond, as with many industrial manufactories, they had a lot of different clubs, and they would play against other companies like Bethlehem Steel or Republic Steel, and things like that. So bowling leagues, baseball leagues. There's a girls and women's club. There were men's and boys clubs. So again, really trying to bring the office workers together in a cohesive unit, all moving in one direction. Yeah, this is one of my favorite things. This was out of one of the books in the gallery there that they have in 701 Seneca. So someone had the foresight of taking all of the interoffice memos and pasting them into a book. And this is one of the more funny ones that were out of there. So this was as you can see, it's November 18th or November 13th of 1900. They were supplying spoons for the coffee break, and all of a sudden, there's all these spoons that go missing. Right, so it's not unlike today if you go into an employee break room and no one can find silverware, no one can find a ladle or something like that, So it's not much different than before. So they stopped furnishing spoons because all the spoons were gone. So again, that's out of a interoffice memo book where they would post things on billboards, and either a secretary or something took them down, pasted them into a binder, and you can go visit that binder at the Larkin Gallery at 701 Seneca. So again, it gives real nice day-to-day insight into what life was like, not just in terms of the Larkin Company as an employee, but life in general. All right, here's some interesting names from the companies, bowling leagues, baseball leagues, things like that. They had the Sweet Home Team, the Ducky Doos, the Honor Brights, right? The Yankee Tanks and the Baby Dolls, right? So a lot of those were taken from product names, right? So maybe they all worked in the same department or division, and so they created their names from those products. This was something, this was a quote from the Westinghouse Electric Company in 1907 about the Larkin Administration Building. Built on an unattractive site amid smoke, noise, dirt, and its interior shut in by thick walls and double glass windows, hermetically sealed, is attractive, clean, sanitary, pleasant, quiet, and remains so regardless of exterior conditions. Right. So also, I think that's a great example because there was a church right next to the Larkin Administration Building. And also just to the left of the administration building, there was a school. And I think with Larkin's growth, the church said, oh, you know what, we're out of here. We can't have services here. It's too dirty and too smelly all the time. So the church actually closed up and moved, and Larkin took over the church. All right, so that became their auditorium. They cut the steeple down. But in the book, I have nice shots of the church with the steeple. And also the school, just a little to the west, meaning heading towards the lake. I think the school said, oh boy, we're in an industrial area now. We got to move school number 5. And so they did move school number 5 to probably a more safe area because, you know, there's a lot of train tracks, a lot of train spurs going from building to building, and it just probably became unsafe. So within that, Frank Lloyd Wright wanted to make this, yes, a hermetically sealed, clean environment where it did bring in fresh air, a lot of light, you know, to kind of, again, separate the office class from the worker class. All right, so also kind of what Larkin did for Buffalo itself, they would establish flower drives, and this is an example. The picture in the background is a flower drive, and so you can see 3 women working at a desk in the building, and you can see all the flower pots, obviously, evidently around them. They would give away Thanksgiving meals. They did transport workers during a streetcar strikes of 1913, 18, and 22, when the streetcar and the bus system stopped working. Larkin would go out with their trucks and bring workers to their place of employment. They put an organ in 1925 into the Larkin Administration Building. They would host concerts. They also hosted films in the auditorium, which, as I mentioned, was the church before the church vacated that area. And they did set up war committees to ship product overseas, especially for World War I, because by World War II they were already in great decline. And in their employee newsletter, again called Ourselves, they had a section of With the Colors to honor those workers that were fighting in the front lines in Europe. All right, so as much as can be done, they did embrace the women's movement of the 1910s in the Larkin idea. Again, the newsletter that went out to their customer base, and in Ourselves, the news that went to employees. They did start writing about women's rights and voting rights. They did host Booker T. Washington to speak about ethnic rights and the civil rights. They also had a lot of articles, kind of as we show here. Be a Self-Starter was one of the names of the articles. Also, the 10 Demandments, which I really enjoy. The Great Work of the Present, and the High Cost of Drinking. So for those employees that could be shamed a little bit if they imbibed a little too much at work or after work. So again, work ethic with a little religious zeal inserted in there. And so those are, to strive to be something better. And there's a Larkin Club behind it, that photograph. So there's a club there. That's out of Minerva, Ohio. And I think it was a club of 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or a club of, maybe there's another person in there. All right, so this is John Larkin on the 50th anniversary, 1 year before he died. This was kind of maybe a nice summary because he stood there outside of plant and on the 50th anniversary shook every local employee's hand. So they stood in a line, shook his hand, and then they each got a medallion. I can't guarantee if every factory worker got a medallion, but certainly the office workers got a medallion, like like an Olympic gold medal. It was about that size, and it had the Larkin factory on it, and a picture of John Larkin on the other side. So again, he tried to build a connect while he was the owner. He tried to build that connection with his employees. Oh, and there's the cover of the book. There's my email. If you ever want to chat further, correct me on something, there's my email. Please feel free to reach out to me. And hope you enjoyed. And now we'll continue with some questions.
Oh, thank you, Shane. That was wonderful.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah, we do have quite a few things here. So what I'm starting with will kind of go back into the beginning, but we have a person that says, I believe the Army Navy surplus store has relocated to Bailey and Seneca.
Oh, that's the one. Okay. Now they have a picture of they have like a makeshift plane out there now, I think, right? So, okay, well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Uncle Sam's, maybe it's called. Thank you.
Next thing, this person is wondering, do you have an overhead Google modern map of the site to show as a comparison between the old photos and today?
No, unfortunately, I don't. I don't know how to do that though. So that would be that would be pretty fabulous. So if this individual, you have my email, if you want to reach, if you know how to do that, or you can help me or give me some guidance on that. I did create a Google map for my other book, The Buffalo Z-Side Industry, and I put the little dots where all of the companies used to be that are in the book. So I might need help with that too. So, yeah, I think I would love to try and do something, like one of those things that goes back and forth, and you can see yesterday or today, yesteryear and today and things like that. So please send me an email, and if you choose to, and maybe you can help me with that.
That would be great. Next thing, is there a product catalog picture available anywhere?
Yeah, there should be. Certainly at the research library in the museum, they actually have old catalogs from, I don't remember the dates, but certainly like say 1900 to 1915, they actually have the catalogs that would go to, their secretaries and their customer base. So those can easily be located there. I don't know if they're open, that sort of thing. They might not be now, but if you were to do a Google search, I have not, but if you were to say do a Google search for Larkin product and premium list, right? And I believe you mentioned that but that would be the official title before it just became, just became the catalog, right? The Larkin catalog. You might be able to find some images from there. And certainly the gallery might have some examples under display cases.
Thanks, Shane. Next thing, great lecture, thank you. Are there archive records of employees who worked there and searchable by name?
I don't believe so. They should have payroll records at the History Museum, right? So they have the Darwin Martin papers, right, which is a great resource as well. And then they have the Larkin papers, right? So the Larkin papers, so maybe the Darwin Martins are a subset of the Larkin, but they are their own separate collection. And I'm sure there are payroll ledgers in there. I do not believe they're searchable digitally. I don't believe they digitize the ledgers, but if you had a family member or something, or just out of interest, you could probably ask for a payroll ledger or something that would show the listing of employees. I did not use that for the book, but the research library would probably have something for that.
Thank you, Shane.
Yes.
Next thing is something you've kind of touched on, but I'm wondering if you want to expand on anything. The question is, where did these ethics originate from?
I think it was a combination of, there was a growth of like a global, it was a really strange time, 1900 to 1920.
It's 11 o'clock.
Sorry, that was me. It's my computer. So Right. There's like a real strong global anarchist movement that were assassinating people left and right. And certainly William McKinley his death was the result of this global anarchy movement. And then certainly what led us into World War One. There was a lot of like the Triangle Shirtwaist Company factory fire in New York City in 1911. That really brought to light labor policies and labor rules. So you had this great mesh of things going on and affecting society as a whole, whether it's through work or education or the flood of immigration and things like that. So stuff we deal with today, right? So I think it really was powered by William Heath. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his first name. I guess I could look it up, but so there's the Heath House there at Soldiers Circle, which was the Frank Lloyd Wright. So he was a major executive, and he really brought that religious zeal to the humanist zeal of Larkin Company. Certainly, then embraced by John Larkin himself of family, community, fraternity, global harmony. So I don't know if that's answering your question, but I think that it came from the executive group themselves, brought on again by Frank Lloyd Wright. He also kind of had that belief. Albert Hubbard kind of embraced that sort of the globalism and helping your fellow man. So I think it just pervaded itself throughout the executive management group.
Thanks, Shane.
Yes.
We do have about a handful more things. Do you have time to give to us to finish up here, or do you want to end?
I'm done. No, yeah, I'm done. I'm out of here. No, I'm good. Yeah, sure.
All right. Part of me was thinking you were serious, and I was like, oh, well, this has never happened before. What do we do?
Yeah, it's all good. Yeah, I'm good.
All right, cool. Thanks. Next question. What happened to the company between 1900 and 1922?
Oh, well, that was their period of real growth. All right. So, right. We kind of say that the Larkin Company was the largest mail order business behind J.C. Penney. But I mean, J.C. Penney dwarfed the Larkin Company in terms of size, aggregate yearly sales. So it really grew through the clubs. All right. So I mentioned the Larkin secretaries established the clubs all around the country. That was something that Sears did not do, but they just focused on their catalog themselves. Right around 1915, it took a few years to catch up to 1920, but right around 1915, you had certainly the growth of the automobile. You had an urbanization movement, so people were moving from small towns to larger cities. You had companies nationalizing, right? So all of a sudden, Nabisco's on the map, certainly Ford, General Mills, General Motors. So you had this nationalization of product because of the rail lines and transportation, the growth and stability of transportation across America. And women were going into the workplace, right? Especially during World War One. Rosie the Riveters as we know them in World War II, but there were women working in factories and offices in World War One. And so what that did was Larkin depended on the housewife, right, to go through the catalogs, set up the clubs, and now the women's movement in general, not just working, but women's equality was, becoming, and even now with the 100th anniversary of the women's movement and getting the right to vote. So there was a 3-4 year groundswell of women saying, I'm more than just a housewife, and I'm, so it became kind of passé to order and set up these clubs from a catalog. Women had gotten into the workplace. With the automobiles, they had a little more freedom. Moving to cities, the migration to cities gave them more opportunity. And so the Larkin Company never really identified that the women's roles in the home were changing. And so they just kept focusing on the Larkin clubs, and those clubs shrank. So yeah, they really reached their height around 1920. And then after that, it was a pretty quick downfall. So I hope that answers or helps.
Yeah, thanks, Shane.
Yeah.
Next thing, were the Koss brothers significant in the history of Buffalo?
No, not that I not that I know of. Like I don't there to the best of my knowledge, like the Koss house or something like that, where they built this wonderfully architectural home or area of a neighborhood. They're just highlighted in the records as being two real instrumental brothers that came here from Philadelphia. And I've identified them in the photograph, so I kind of highlight that there. But other than that, no, they may have moved even right back to Philadelphia after 1910. I think when they retired, 1910, 1911, they may have moved back to Philadelphia. But they were really there at the ground floor and really helped the Larkin Company grow.
Thank you. Next. In the early 1970s, I worked on an assembly line in a factory. The company had a policy of hiring only women, allegedly because their fingers were smaller and more nimble than those of men. This could be why only girls and women were working in the factory.
Oh, that's I'll have to use that next time. That's interesting scuttlebutt, like around the plant that you were working at. I did not come across anything in the research like that, but I mean, might be something to that, right? Like in the book, I really highlight a lot of the products and a lot of the machinery that they used to make the product. And yeah, that could very well be that, it's an interesting, yeah, I'm sorry, that's an interesting thought. I can't prove it, but yeah, it's cool.
Definitely. Next, was there one ethnic group like Polish, German, Italian that accounted for the majority of the employees?
That's a good question. Well, certainly Buffalo had a large Irish and they had a large Polish population, kind of, especially even in that area, right? It's kind of on the border between the Polish and German east side and the Irish southern side. But no, I didn't come across anything in the records that highlighted, where their immigrant workforce was from. But yeah, I would certainly say German, Polish, Irish were probably like the top three. I would imagine.
Okay. Next comment here, and I apologize in advance for any mispronunciations, but the Larkin family were followers of Swami Yogananda, hence the study of India classes.
They were. Is that what they? So that individual is making the statement.
That's what Jerry's telling us.
Well, there you go. I didn't come across that. I mean, I didn't focus. So they were saying the family followed this.
Yes.
Oh, see, yeah, for the book, I don't cover much of the family. There's a little of Frances, and that she established like gardens and things like that, like a Japanese garden at their home in Ontario. But no, okay, I had no, and that might talk about with Heath and the religious undertones of their work ethic and community and globalism and fraternity and things like that. Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. What was that? I'm sorry, Katie. What was that name again?
It's Swami, so S as in Sam, W, A, M as in Mary, I, and Yogananda, so Y-O, G as in Gary, A, N as in Nancy, A, N as in Nancy, D as in dog, A, hence the study of India classes.
Interesting. Thank you so much. I'm going to have to do a little more research into the records and see if I can come across anything like that.
Totally. Actually, a couple more things here, if it's okay, we go just a little bit more. A comment, I just learned so much in just 1 hour. Thank you. Can't wait to read and peruse your book.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
We have excellent presentation. Is the Larkin Gallery open during the pandemic?
Oh, I assume that I have to assume, but I assume that it would be because it is an office building, right? So you can enter either through the front at 701 on Seneca Street. Yeah, that's like the main entrance. And you'll see way in front of you like the security desk, but you just kind of veer off to the left. And since it is a office building, I can only imagine that it's open, but maybe everyone's well. No, it's probably still open for workers, so I would imagine that it's still open. Eccles, the restaurant, might not be open, but which would be right next to it.
We have Jerry telling us yes, the gallery is open.
That might be Jerry Puma. All right,
It
so.
is.
Did you? So he's the guy. He's the one who said about the Swami Yogananda, right?
Mhm.
The Indian. Yes, Jerry. Okay, so Jerry, I gave him a shout out. He's a Larkin expert, and he helped with Sharon Osborne establish. There's Osgood. I'm sorry. Establish the Larkin Gallery.
Yes,
They
I try
are.
not to use last names, but yep. And he says contact him about the Swami.
Yes. Yeah, there it is.
Again, sorry if that's mispronouncing that. Let's see. He also tells us there are many catalogs at the gallery. We have that person who mentioned the map. She says, sorry, Shane, my technical expertise is limited, so I don't know how to insert a modern Google map. I'd ask a college student, maybe a niece or nephew.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll do some research into that. We do have maps of the footprint from, say, a bird's eye view, and then using the aerial view on a Google map, there might be, but yeah, now we get into 3D mapping and stuff like that. And I'm not, but thank you. I appreciate that. I will look into that.
Yeah. And now I'm just seeing a bunch of thank yous. So
You're
Shane,
welcome.
thank you as always. It's a blast working with you. And thank you to everybody who's on here. I hope everyone stays safe, stays well, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you. And please feel free to email me if there are questions, have a conversation with me at my email. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.